Dearest stepped outside to fix his fence and met the woman who'd break his walls. He lived at the quiet end of a narrow street where the houses stood a little farther apart and the nights felt longer than usual. His home was small, but well cared for, with clean windows, a neat front path, and a wooden fence that wrapped around the yard. People who passed by often thought he must be content with his peaceful life. He woke up early, left for work at the same time every day, and returned in the evening with a calm, steady routine. Nothing seemed out of place, and nothing ever appeared rushed. Inside, his days were just as quiet. He made his morning tea, listened to the soft ticking of the clock on the wall, and watched the sunlight slowly fill the room. The silence did not feel strange to him. In fact, it had become something he relied on. But years earlier, life had been louder and more crowded with people and plans. Back then he used to talk more, laugh more, and believe that good things stayed forever. But time had a way of changing people, and certain moments from his past had made him more careful with his heart. He never spoke much about those years. If anyone asked, he would simply say that life taught him to value peace. That answer usually ended the conversation. Most neighbors respected his space. They waved when they saw him and sometimes exchanged a few polite words, but no one expected long talks. He was known as a kind but private person, someone who helped when needed but preferred to return to his quiet home once the task was done. The fence around his yard was strong and steady, built with care and checked often. It kept the space neat and marked the edges of his world. Some people saw it as just a fence, but to him, it represented order and control. It reminded him that he could shape his surroundings and keep things simple. Each wooden board stood straight, each nail held firmly in place. He had repaired it many times over the years, not because it was weak, but because he liked knowing it was secure. One evening a storm rolled through the area. The wind grew loud and rain fell steadily against the windows. He sat inside with a book and a warm drink, listening to the sound of the weather outside. He didn't worry much. Storms came and went, just like everything else. By morning the sky cleared and sunlight returned. The air felt fresh and the street looked washed and quiet. When he stepped outside to check his yard, he noticed that part of the fence had fallen. A few boards leaned to one side and a hunted section rested on the ground. It wasn't a big disaster, just the result of strong wind and loose soil. Still, he felt a small sense of responsibility. Fixing things had always helped him feel grounded. He decided to repair it that same day. He gathered his tools from the shed and placed them neatly near the broken section. The morning was calm, and birds moved between the trees as he worked. He measured the wood, straightened the posts, and began setting everything back into place. The task required focus but not much effort. He liked the steady rhythm of hammering and adjusting. It gave him time to think without thinking too deeply. As he worked, he noticed how quiet the street was. A few cars passed in the distance, and someone walked a dog at the far end of the road. The world seemed peaceful again after the storm. He was almost finished when he heard soft footsteps on the sidewalk nearby. At first, he didn't pay much attention. People often walked by without stopping. But this time, the footsteps slowed. He looked up and saw a woman standing a short distance away. For she had a calm expression and a gentle smile, the kind that felt natural rather than forced. She greeted him in a friendly voice and asked if the storm had caused much damage. He answered politely, saying it was only a small section of the fence and nothing serious. She stepped a little closer, careful not to cross into his face without invitation. She introduced herself as someone who had recently moved into a house down the street. He realized he had seen her once or twice before but had never spoken to her. She seemed comfortable and relaxed, as if talking to neighbors was something she enjoyed. He returned the greeting and told her his name. The conversation could have ended there, as most of his conversations did. Usually he kept exchanges short and returned to whatever he was doing. But she asked if he needed help holding one of the boards while he secured it. He hesitated for a moment. He wasn't used to accepting help, especially from someone he barely knew. Still, her tone was kind and simple, without any pressure. He nodded and handed her a piece of wood. She held it steady while he adjusted the nails. They worked quietly for a few minutes. The task went faster with 2 people. When the section of fence finally stood straight again, he stepped back to check it. It looked solid, just like before the storm. She smiled and said it looked good. He thanked her for the help. For a moment, they both stood there in the morning light, unsure whether to continue talking or return to their own routines.
He expected her to say goodbye and walk away, but instead she asked how long he had lived in the neighborhood.
The question was simple, and he answered without thinking too much. He told her he had been there for several years. She shared that she had moved in recently for a fresh start. Her words were calm, but carried a sense of meaning. He didn't ask for details, and she didn't offer them. Yet there was an understanding in the way she spoke, as if she also valued quiet and new beginnings. They talked for a little while longer about the area, the nearby shops, and how peaceful the street was compared to busier parts of town. He found himself speaking more than usual, though still carefully. She listened with interest, responding in a way that felt easy and natural. There was no rush in her voice, no need to fill every second with words.
Eventually, she said she should let him finish his work and wished him a good day. He nodded and returned the kind words.
As she walked away, he picked up his tools and checked the fence one last time. Everything was in place. The task he had planned for the morning was complete. But as he stood there, he noticed something unusual. The quiet of the yard felt slightly different, not empty, but thoughtful. The brief conversation lingered in his mind longer than he expected. He wasn't sure why. It had only been a simple exchange between neighbors. Still, it had been more than he was used to. He carried his tools back to the shed and went inside. The house felt the same as always, yet a small part of him felt lighter. He made himself another cup of tea and sat near the window. From there, he could see the repaired fence standing firm. Beyond it, the street looked calm and ordinary. He told himself it was just a normal morning, nothing worth overthinking, yet he caught himself wondering if he would see her again during one of her walks. The thought surprised him. For so long he had been comfortable with his routine and his distance from others. Now, after a short conversation and a shared task, something had shifted in a quiet, almost unnoticeable way. He didn't call it change. He didn't call it hope. It was simply a small moment that felt different from the rest. A broken fence had needed fixing, and he had stepped outside to repair it. In doing so, he had met someone new, someone who spoke with warmth and listened with ease. The day moved on as usual. He finished his chores, read a few pages of his book, and prepared for the next morning's routine. Yet every now and then he glanced toward the yard as if expecting to see a familiar figure walking past again. He didn't know that this quiet encounter would slowly become something meaningful. For now it was just a morning after a storm, a repaired fence, and a simple conversation between 2 neighbors. But sometimes the smallest moments carry the beginnings of larger changes. And though he didn't realize it yet, stepping outside to fix a broken fence had opened the door to a story he never expected to live. In the days that followed, life returned to its usual calm rhythm. But something small had changed in the way he moved through his mornings. He still woke up early and followed the same routine, but now he sometimes paused by the front window a little longer than before. He told himself he was only checking the weather or looking at the street. Yet a quiet part of him wondered if he might see her walking by again. He did not have to wait long. 2 days after fixing the fence, he stepped outside to take out the trash and noticed her at the end of the street. She was walking at an easy pace, hands tucked into her light jacket, looking around as if she was still learning the neighborhood. When she saw him, she lifted her hand in a friendly wave. He returned the gesture, a little unsure but not uncomfortable. She walked over and greeted him again, asking how the fence was holding up after the repair. He smiled slightly and said it was still standing strong. Their conversation was simple, made up of small questions and small answers. She spoke about how peaceful the street felt in the mornings, and how she enjoyed walking before the day became busy. He listened and agreed. He had always liked the quiet hours, too. The talk lasted only a few minutes, but it felt easy. There was no pressure to say anything important, no need to impress or explain. When she said goodbye and continued her walk, he went back inside with a calm feeling he could not quite name. It was not excitement, and it was not worry. It was simply a sense that something new had entered his routine in a gentle way. Over the next week, they crossed paths again and again. Sometimes it was in the morning while he checked the mail. Sometimes it was in the evening when he watered the plants near the fence. Each time they spoke a little more. They shared short stories about daily life, favorite foods, and small habits that made their days easier. She had a way of speaking that felt open but not overwhelming. She did not ask too many questions, yet she showed real interest in what he said. He noticed that she often carried a small notebook. One afternoon, while they stood near the fence, he asked about it. She smiled and said she liked to write down thoughts and ideas that came to her during walks. Sometimes it was just a line about the sky or a reminder of something she wanted to do later. He found that interesting. He had never been someone who wrote things down, but he understood the comfort of quiet habits. As their conversations continued, he began to feel less guarded. He did not share anything too personal at first. He spoke about his job, the way he liked to keep his home organized, and how he enjoyed fixing things when they broke. She listened and shared small details about her own life. She had moved to the neighborhood not long ago and was still getting used to the slower pace. She spoke about wanting a peaceful place where she could start fresh and focus on simple, meaningful days. He did not ask why she needed a fresh start. He sensed that everyone had their reasons, and sometimes it was better to let those reasons stay unspoken until the right time. Still, he appreciated the honesty in her voice. It made him feel less alone in his own quiet way of living. One evening, as the sun began to set, he was trimming a small plant near the front yard when she walked by again. She stopped and commented on how neat the garden looked. He shrugged and said he liked keeping things in order. She laughed softly and said that order could be comforting. Her words stayed with him. He realized that she understood the value of calm spaces and steady routines. Their talks slowly grew longer. What began as quick greetings turned into 10-minute conversations, then 20. Sometimes they stood by the fence, sometimes on the sidewalk.
They spoke about favorite books, old movies, and the way certain songs could bring back memories.
He found himself remembering things he had not thought about in years. Not painful memories, but simple ones, like the taste of tea on a rainy day, or the sound of laughter from long ago. He noticed changes in himself that were small but real. He started stepping outside more often, even when there was nothing to fix. He began making an extra cup of tea in the evening, just in case she happened to walk by. Once he almost called out to her from the gate, but stopped himself. He was not used to inviting people into a space. Rasp. Still, the thought crossed his mind, and that alone felt new. She never pushed him to open up. She never asked questions that felt too personal. Instead, she shared her own small stories about adjusting to the neighborhood and finding comfort in simple routines. Baji spoke about how walking helped her clear her mind and how meeting kind neighbors made a new place feel like home. He listened carefully, realizing that her presence brought a quiet warmth to his otherwise steady days. One afternoon, she arrived at his gate holding a small container. She said she had cooked too much food and thought he might like some. He hesitated for a moment, surprised by the gesture. No one had brought him food in a very long time, but her expression was sincere and relaxed, so he accepted it with thanks. He invited her to stand in the yard while he found a place to set it down. They ended up talking for nearly half an hour that day. They stood near the repaired section of the fence, now strong and straight again. The conversation moved easily from one topic to another. They spoke about favorite meals, the comfort of home-cooked food, and how sharing small things could brighten an ordinary day. He realized he was smiling more than usual. After she left, he went inside and sat at the kitchen table with the container of food. The house felt a little less quiet than before. He took a moment to appreciate the simple kindness of the gesture. It was not a grand event, just a neighbor sharing a meal. Friends. Yet it felt meaningful. It reminded him that connection did not always arrive in big, dramatic ways. Sometimes it arrived in small steps and gentle conversations. Over the next few days, he noticed himself looking forward to their talks, but did not plan them, and he did not expect them. But when they happened, they brought a sense of ease he had not felt in a long time. He began to wonder if it was possible to let someone into his life without losing the peace he had built for himself. He remained careful, of course. Old habits did not disappear overnight. There were moments when he almost stepped back into his usual distance. Yet each time he considered pulling away, he remembered how natural their conversations felt. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people sharing small parts of their days. One evening, as they stood near the fence watching the sky grow darker, she said something simple that stayed with him. She said that sometimes the best changes in life begin quietly, without big plans or sudden decisions. Best. Sometimes they begin with a simple hello and grow from there. He nodded, not knowing exactly how to respond, but he understood what she meant. When he returned inside that night, he paused by the window again. The street was calm, and the repaired fence stood strong. For the first time in a long while, he did not feel completely alone in his quiet routine. He still valued his peace, still appreciated his space, but now there was a small opening where something new could grow. He did not know where this growing friendship would lead. He did not try to predict it. For now, it was enough to share small conversations, kind gestures, and quiet moments. Each meeting added a little more warmth to his days and softened the edges of the walls he had built around himself. And so, without any grand plan or sudden change, their connection continued to grow. It moved slowly and naturally, like a calm morning turning into a gentle afternoon. What began as a simple exchange over a broken fence had become a steady presence in his life. He still lived behind the same wooden boards and followed the same routines, but now those routines held the possibility of shared moments and unexpected smiles. As the days slowly turned into weeks, their simple conversations became a steady part of his routine. He still lived the same quiet life, still woke early and followed the same patterns, but now there was a gentle change in the way he moved through his day. He noticed the sound of footsteps on the sidewalk more often. He found himself stepping outside at times when he normally would have stayed inside. He did not plan these moments. They just happened. Sometimes she passed by while he was watering the plants near the fence. Other times they met near the mailbox or at the corner of the street. Each meeting began with a small greeting and then grew into a longer talk without effort. There was something comfortable about the way they spoke. It did not feel forced or rushed, for he began to notice that he laughed more easily when she was around. Not loud laughter, but quiet, real smiles that stayed for a while. She had a way of telling simple stories about her day that made ordinary things sound interesting. She spoke about trying new recipes, learning the neighborhood streets, and finding small joys in quiet places. He listened carefully, often surprised by how much he enjoyed these simple talks. One evening, she brought 2 cups of tea and handed one to him over the fence. He hesitated for only a second before accepting it. They stood on opposite sides, sipping slowly and watching the sky change color as the sun went down. It was a peaceful moment. No one spoke for a while, and the silence did not feel awkward. It felt shared. He realized then how long it had been since he had shared silence with someone without feeling uncomfortable. Usually he filled his quiet with tasks or distractions, but this silence felt calm and steady, like a soft pause in a long day. When she finally spoke, she said she liked evenings like this, when everything slowed down.
He nodded and agreed.
As their friendship grew, he began to open up in small ways. He told her about his work and how he liked fixing things because it gave him a sense of control. He spoke about how he had always preferred simple routines over busy schedules. He did not share anything too personal yet, but even these small details felt like steps forward. She shared parts of her own story, too. She spoke about moving to the neighborhood for a fresh start and wanting a calm place to rebuild her routine. She talked about how change could be difficult but also necessary. Her words were gentle and thoughtful, and he could tell she had experienced her own share of challenges. He started to feel that she understood quiet struggles without needing to hear every detail. That understanding made it easier for him to relax. He no longer felt the need to end conversations quickly. Instead, he found himself staying outside longer, talking about small things that slowly became meaningful. One afternoon, they decided to take a short walk together around the block. It was a simple idea, nothing special, yet it felt new to him. He had walked those streets many times alone, always keeping to himself. Walking beside someone else felt different. They moved at an easy pace, talking about the houses, the trees, and the way the neighborhood changed with the seasons. As they walked, he realized he was no longer thinking about keeping his distance. He was simply enjoying the moment. The air felt fresh, and the conversation flowed naturally. When they returned to his gate, he noticed that time had passed quickly. He was not used to time moving that way. Usually, his days felt long and predictable. Now, certain moments seemed to pass gently and without effort. But still, even as he enjoyed this growing friendship, part of him remained careful. There were memories from his past that he kept locked away. He did not talk about them, and he avoided thinking about them too much. But sometimes during quiet moments at night, he wondered if those old experiences were the reason he had built such strong emotional walls. One evening, while they sat in the yard with 2 cups of tea, the conversation turned a little more serious.
She spoke about how everyone carries something from the past that shapes how they see the world.
Her tone was calm and thoughtful, not heavy. She did not ask him to share anything, but her words made him reflect. He looked down at his cup and thought for a moment before speaking. He said that sometimes people build quiet lives because it feels safer that way. He did not go into details, but he admitted that he had learned to be careful with trust. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she simply said that being careful was understandable, but it did not have to last forever. Her response stayed gentle. She did not try to give advice or push him to explain more. Instead, she spoke about patience and how trust grows slowly, like a plant that needs time and care. He appreciated that she did not rush the conversation. It made him feel respected and understood. That night, after she left, he sat alone in his living room and thought about their talk. He realized that for the first time in years he had spoken honestly about his feelings, even if only a little. It felt strange, but also relieving. He did not feel pressured or judged. He simply felt heard. Over the next few days, he noticed that his home felt slightly different. The same walls stood around him. The same furniture filled the rooms, but the space felt less closed. He found himself opening the windows more often and letting fresh air in. He started fixing small things he had ignored for years, like a loose handle on a cabinet and a lamp that flickered sometimes. These changes were small, but they mattered. They showed him that he was beginning to move forward in quiet ways. He was not rushing into anything or making big decisions.
He was simply allowing himself to feel a little more open to connection. Their meetings continued, sometimes short and sometimes longer.
They shared meals once or twice, always simple and relaxed. He found himself enjoying the company in a way he had almost forgotten was possible. Breath. There was no pressure to impress, no need to pretend. They spoke honestly and listened carefully. Yet, despite this growing comfort, there were still moments when he felt unsure. Part of him worried that getting too close to someone could lead to disappointment again. He did not want to lose the peace he had worked so hard to build. These thoughts came quietly and stayed in the background, like distant clouds on an otherwise clear day. One evening, as they stood near the fence once more, she mentioned how nice it was to have a neighbor who felt like a friend. The word friend stayed with him. He had not used that word in a long time. He realized that their connection had grown beyond simple greetings and small talk. It had become something steady and meaningful. He did not say much in response, but he smiled and nodded. Inside, he felt a mix of warmth and caution. He wanted to protect the calm life he had created, yet he also wanted to keep this new connection. He did not know exactly how to balance the two. Later that night, he stood by the window and looked out at the yard. The fence stood strong and straight, just as he had repaired it weeks before. But now, it felt less like a barrier and more like a quiet reminder of where this connection had begun. He realized that while the fence still marked the edge of his property, it no longer marked the edge of his world. Bah! Little by little, the emotional walls he had built over the years were beginning to soften. Not all at once, and not completely, but enough for him to feel the difference. He understood that change did not have to be loud or sudden. It could happen slowly, through small conversations, shared moments, and simple acts of kindness. For now, that was enough. He was not ready to open every door from his past, but he was ready to keep this new door slightly open. And so their friendship continued to grow, steady and calm. Each day added another small layer of trust. Right. Each conversation made the space between them feel more comfortable. He still valued his quiet life, but he no longer felt the need to keep everyone at a distance. For the first time in years, he began to believe that letting someone into his life did not mean losing his peace. It could mean adding to it. And as he stood there in the quiet of his home, he realized that sometimes the strongest walls do not fall all at once. Sometimes they soften slowly, one honest moment at a time. For a while, everything moved gently and without trouble. Their conversations continued, their routine of small meetings stayed steady, and the quiet friendship between them felt natural. He had grown used to seeing her during walks or while working in the yard. It became a comforting part of his day, something he did not plan, but always noticed. Psst. Yet, as the connection grew stronger, something inside him also began to stir. It was not a loud feeling, but a quiet restlessness that appeared when he was alone at night. He started to realize that he was letting someone come closer to him than he had allowed in years. That realization brought both warmth and worry. He appreciated the comfort of their friendship, but a part of him still remembered the pain that came from trusting too much in the past. He tried not to think about it. During the day, he focused on his routine and on the calm moments they shared.
But sometimes, after a longer conversation with her, he would return inside and feel uncertain.
He would ask himself whether it was safe to let things grow deeper. He wondered if he was ready for that kind of change. One afternoon, they sat in the yard with cups of tea, talking about simple things as usual. The air was calm, and the sky looked clear. She spoke about how much she had started to enjoy the neighborhood, and how good it felt to have someone nearby who understood quiet living.
Her words were kind and honest.
He listened, but instead of feeling relaxed, he felt a sudden wave of fear. It came without warning. The closer he felt to someone, the more he worried about losing that calm again. He nodded and smiled during the conversation, but inside he felt unsure. After she left, he stayed in the yard for a long time, staring at the fence and thinking. That evening, he told himself he needed some distance. He did not want to hurt anyone or make promises he was not ready to keep. So he stepped back. The next morning when he saw her walking by, he gave only a quick greeting and returned inside. When she stopped by later that week, he kept the conversation short. He told himself he was just busy, but in truth, he was afraid of getting too close. She noticed the change, but did not react strongly. She still greeted him warmly when they crossed paths, but she did not push him to talk. Her calm response made him feel both relieved and guilty. He appreciated the space, yet he missed their longer talks. Days passed with fewer conversations. He returned to his quiet routine, but it felt different now. The silence that once felt peaceful began to feel heavier. He realized he had grown used to sharing small moments with someone. Without those moments, his days felt a little longer and less bright. One evening he sat by the window and watched the street as the sun went down. He saw her walking in the distance, moving at the same steady pace as always. But she did not stop at his gate this time. She simply walked by and continued down the road. He felt a quiet sense of loss, though nothing had truly ended. He began to understand that stepping back had not brought him peace. Instead, it had reminded him how much he valued their connection. He thought about the way she listened without judging, and how easy their conversations had felt. He realized he had pulled away not because something was wrong, but because he was afraid of something going wrong in the future. That night, he stayed awake longer than usual, thinking about the past and the present. He remembered how he had built his life around safety and routine. Those choices had protected him, but they had also kept him alone. Now, for the first time in years, he had a chance to build something different. The thought made him nervous, but it also gave him hope. The next morning he stepped outside earlier than usual. The air was cool, and the street was quiet. He saw her at the end of the road, walking slowly with her usual calm expression. For a moment, he considered going back inside. Old habits told him to avoid difficult conversations. But another part of him told him to stay. When she reached his gate, he greeted her more warmly than he had in days. She smiled and returned the greeting. There was a short pause, a quiet moment, where both of them seemed to understand that something needed to be said. She took a deep breath and spoke honestly. He told her that he had pulled away because he felt unsure and a little afraid. He explained that opening up to someone after a long time of being alone was not easy for him. He did not go into full detail about his past, but he admitted that trust had been difficult for him for many years. She listened carefully, her expression calm and understanding. When he finished, she thanked him for being honest. She said she had noticed the distance but did not want to pressure him. She told him that trust and friendship take time, and that it was okay to move slowly. Her response made him feel lighter. He realized he had been worried about disappointing her or being misunderstood. Instead, she showed patience and kindness. She did not expect quick changes or perfect answers. She simply valued the connection they had built and was willing to let it grow at its own pace. They stood there for a while, talking more openly than before.
He admitted that he was still learning how to let someone into his life again.
She said that she was also learning how to build new connections after her own changes in life. They both understood that neither of them needed to rush. After that conversation, something shifted between them. The distance he had created began to fade. They returned to their usual routine of short talks and shared moments, but now there was a deeper understanding. He no longer felt the need to hide behind silence when he felt unsure. Instead, he allowed himself to speak honestly, even if his words were simple. In the days that followed, he noticed that he felt calmer. The fear that had pushed him away began to lose its strength.
He realized that opening up did not mean losing control of his life.
It meant allowing someone to be part of it in a gentle way. One evening, as they stood near the fence again, he looked at the repaired boards and thought about how strong they were. They had been broken once, but they were fixed with care and patience. He realized that people could be like that too. Even after difficult times, they could rebuild and become strong again. He did not know what the future would bring. He did not try to plan it. For now it was enough to know that he had faced his fear and chosen connection instead of distance. He had stepped forward instead of stepping back. Their friendship continued, steady and calm. The turning point had come quietly, through honesty and patience rather than big events. He learned that it was possible to keep his peaceful life while also letting someone share it. He did not have to give up his routine or his quiet space. He simply had to allow room for another person within it. And so, with each passing day, he felt his emotional walls grow softer. They did not disappear completely, but they no longer felt unbreakable. He understood that change could be gentle and slow, and that trust could grow in small steps. Standing in his yard one evening, he looked at the fence that had once symbolized distance. Now it felt like a reminder of how something broken could be repaired with care. In the same way, he realized that his guarded heart could open again. One honest moment at a time. The days moved forward in a calm and steady way after their honest conversation. Nothing dramatic happened, and nothing needed to. The change between them was quiet but clear. He no longer felt the urge to step back whenever things felt meaningful. Instead, he allowed each day to unfold naturally. He still kept his routine, still valued his peaceful home and simple life. But now there was room in that life for someone else's presence. Morning light continued to fill his home the same way it always had, but now he sometimes stepped outside with a second cup of tea. Sometimes she would pass by, and sometimes she would not. When she did, they shared a few minutes of conversation. When she did not, he still felt calm. He had stopped measuring his days by whether or not he saw her. Instead, he appreciated the connection as something steady rather than something he needed to hold tightly. One afternoon, she came by with a small plant in a simple clay pot. She said she had bought a few for her own yard and thought he might like one too. He accepted it with a quiet smile. Together, they chose a spot near the repaired fence to place it. The plant was small and green, not very special at first glance, but it felt meaningful. It was something new growing in a space that had once felt closed off. As they pressed the soil around it, he thought about how much had changed since the day he fixed the fence. Back then, he had stepped outside expecting a quiet morning and nothing more. Now he stood in the same yard with someone who had become an important part of his daily life. The difference did not feel overwhelming. It felt natural, like something that had grown slowly and quietly over time. At her desk, their conversations became deeper, but they never lost their simplicity. They still talked about ordinary things like food, weather, and small plans for the week. Yet there was also a comfort in sharing thoughts and feelings that they might not have shared with others. He found himself speaking more freely about his past, not all at once, but in small pieces. She listened without judgment and shared parts of her own story in return. They began to spend more time together in ways that felt easy. Sometimes they cooked simple meals and sat in the yard while the evening air cooled. Sometimes they walked through the neighborhood, pointing out small details they had noticed. He discovered that he enjoyed these quiet moments more than he expected. They did not disturb his peace. Instead, they added to it. Perception. He also noticed that his home felt different. It was still quiet, still neat and organized, but it no longer felt closed. He opened the windows more often and let fresh air move through the rooms.
He placed the small plant near the window where it could get sunlight.
He even added a chair in the yard where they could sit together comfortably. These were small changes, but they reflected a larger shift in his life. One evening, as they sat near the fence watching the sky grow darker, he spoke about how much he had changed over the past weeks. He said that for a long time he believed keeping distance was the best way to protect himself. He thought that staying quiet and alone would keep his life simple and safe. But now he realized that too much distance had kept him from experiencing connection and warmth. She listened and smiled softly. She said that sometimes people build strong walls because they need time to heal, and there is nothing wrong with that. But she also said that walls do not have to stay up forever. When the time feels right, they can open small doors and let light in. But her words felt calm and wise, and he understood them deeply. He looked at the fence beside them. It was still standing strong, just as it had after he repaired it. But now it felt different. It no longer symbolized separation. Instead, it reminded him of the day he stepped outside and met someone who slowly helped him see life in a new way. The fence still marked the edge of his yard, but it no longer marked the edge of his world. As weeks turned into months, their connection remained steady. They did not rush into big plans or dramatic changes. They allowed things to grow at a natural pace. They supported each other in small ways, like sharing meals, offering help with simple tasks, and being present during quiet moments. He found comfort in knowing that he did not have to face everything alone anymore. He also noticed that he had become more open with other people in the neighborhood. He greeted neighbors more warmly and sometimes stopped to talk for a few minutes. He did not feel the need to retreat into silence as often. It was not that he had changed completely, but he had become more at ease with letting people in. One morning he stood in the yard watering the small plant they had placed near the fence. It had grown a little taller and looked healthy. The sight made him smile. Growth took time, and it required care, but it was always possible. He realized that his own life had followed a similar path. He had spent years keeping everything contained and controlled. Now, slowly, he was allowing new experiences and connections to grow.
She walked up to the gate that morning and greeted him with her usual calm smile.
They talked about their plans for the day and shared a few quiet jokes. As they spoke, he felt a sense of gratitude. He was thankful for the simple way their lives had come together. There had been no grand event, no dramatic turning point. Just a broken fence, a kind greeting, and many small moments that built trust over time. He thought about how easy it would have been to stay inside that day after the storm. He could have fixed the fence quickly and returned to his routine without speaking to anyone. But he had stepped outside, and that small choice had changed everything. It reminded him that life sometimes offers quiet opportunities for change, and it is up to each person to notice them. Their story did not end with a dramatic conclusion. It continued in the same gentle way it had begun. They kept sharing days, conversations, and small acts of kindness. He kept his peaceful routine, but now it included someone who understood and respected it. She continued building her fresh start in the neighborhood, knowing she had a friend who cared. One evening, as the sun set behind the houses, they stood together near the fence and looked at the sky. The street was calm, and the street was quiet. He realized that he no longer felt the need to hide behind emotional walls. He still valued his space in his quiet life, but he no longer used distance as a shield. Instead, he used openness and trust in small, steady ways. He understood that healing and growth do not happen all at once. They happen through simple choices and honest moments. By stepping outside to fix something broken, he had unknowingly taken the first step toward repairing something inside himself. And by meeting someone who approached life with patience and kindness, he had discovered that even strong walls can soften over time. The fence still stood around his yard, strong and steady, but it no longer felt like a barrier. It was simply part of the home he lived in, a home that now felt warmer and more open than before. As he looked at it, he felt a quiet sense of peace and hope. Sometimes, the smallest moments lead to the biggest changes. And sometimes all it takes is stepping outside and saying hello for a new chapter to begin.